Hey everybody, today I'm talking about two games from Thing 12 Games, the first of which being The Seals of Cthulhu. This is a two-player only game that takes around 15 minutes to play. The second of which being Matches, which is a 30-minute game for 2 to 6 players. Now before I get started on my reviews for both of these games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so let's start with The Seals of Cthulhu. Again, 2 players only, and this one takes only around 15 minutes to play. Before I get started on the actual game, I wanted to mention the amazing production quality for this one. Very top production, to be honest. A lovely box, really kind of thematic, immersive little documents that come with it. Even lovely little bag and stuff. Full props to the every detail that's been explored here when it comes to the quality of the components. But let's get on to the gameplay. So each player will have an identical set of cards, 5 of which are always going to be the same. So you can see here that each player has a gate closing, a gate, a potion, a Necronomicon, and a journal, but they do have different styles of artwork. And they do, even though they do the same thing, they do vary in their actual values and what they do. So you can see there's like a 5 and a 1 and a 5 and a 1, and I'll explain the relevance of that later. But each game is also going to have a different kind of elder god. It says to start with the Shoggoth one here. So these are always going to be interchangeable, and there's a ton of these that you can play with. You've got Cthulhu and so on. So all the different kind of elder gods that you can choose to play with, just to mix up the gameplay just a little bit. So after you've got your decks and your starting little meeples here, which are your kind of bidding currency in this game, because this does have a degree of bidding and bluffing in it, you're going to get ready to play the game. So let's show you how the game works. So on the active player's turn, you're going to select one of your cards to put up to be claimed, essentially. So let's just say, without thinking, I wanted to put this gate up. And without showing the other player, you're going to put it face down in the center of the table. And if you want to, you can choose to place as many of these cultists, or as few as you want, next to it, which is essentially your bid to claim that particular card. Now, your opponent can either choose to take your bid and add it to their workers, meaning they've got more currency on their turn, or they can choose to raise the bid. So let's just say I put 2 here, my opponent then put 3 down, and then I say, you know what, I'm not willing to pay more than that. I'm going to take all of these cultists, add them to my supply, and then my opponent will get this card and place them face up in their tableau. So these cards have a number of different information on them. The first of which is the control value. So the control value is essentially your points at the end of the game. So this is going to be a 5-point card if it's still face up in front of you. And it's also got an influence value. So the influence is important, because not only can you use the little cultist to bid for claimage of those cards, you can also choose to sacrifice or forfeit cards by adding that to the bid as well. So this one has got a great amount of points, but has not got such a great influence value. Now you can also see that each card has a special ability on them. This one says, the gate says, if you control both face up, so all these powers apart from one will be relevant when you have both parts of the book. So I'm not sure if I can find it quickly here. Let's take a quick look. There we go. So if we had both parts, this is going to be active and available to be used on that player's turn. So again, you can see that if you control both face up, you may flip one face down. If you do, you may flip another face down card face up. So you can imagine, as some of your cards get attacked and might get hit, you can use this power to flip them back over. Or of course, it'd have to be used on another card, but you get the gist. Let's take a quick look at some of the other cards and what they do. So we've got this interchangeable Shoggoth one here, which is actually worth -3 points. So you might want to make sure that that one's flipped face down by the end so that you're not losing those points, or make sure that your opponent has them. This one says that if you control both face up, you may flip one face down, then flip one face up card of an opponent that belongs to an opponent face down. So that one, it kind of attacks your opponent's points. The gate closure says that if you control both, you can flip another card face up, another face up card face down. So that one, again, might be useful to flip something like that over so that you're not suffering those negative points. The potion simply says you may flip this card face down to flip another card face up. The Necronomicon says that if you control both cards face up, you may swap one face down card you control with one from your hand. So a nice little sleight of hand there. You can change things around. And the Journal says that if you control both face up, you may swap one face up card you control with one from your hand. So those two are very similar. And that's essentially how the game's going to play. Again, you can keep on putting cards forward, going back and forth on the bidding, potentially triggering these cards or tapping them if you have both halves of them. And by the time you played 5 out of your 6 cards, the player with the most points, as in cards face up, will be the winner. You can optionally choose to play with some of the special characters, which will give you a unique ability to use. Like for example, this one here says that once per game, you may force your opponent to turn their bid card face up, so you know what you're playing for. This one here says that if your face-up cards equal exactly 13 control points at the end of your turn, you immediately win. So these kind of spice the gameplay up just a little bit, and an optional thing you can choose to add in should you wish to. Okay, so let's share some quick thoughts on the seals of Cthulhu. Again, mechanically, I find that bidding system really interesting, especially when it's only a 2-player game, and that back and forth between all these cultists is so important because, of course, if you are constantly spending all your people, it's not going to be long before your opponent has all of the currency, and then you're going to have to use previously claimed cards in order to bid future cards, or just get completely not bid at all, and then your opponent's going to mop up and take all of those cards for a very good price. So you have to be very careful about what you're bidding here. And I do like that idea of having the ability or option to spend cards you've already claimed for their influence marker, or for the influence value, sorry. And that can be important because, again, you might spend that 5, which means that you're only going to give a point away, but it means that in a future card, they can use that card back against you and use that influence again to claim a card for themselves. So I do like that back and forth, and the idea that you have to have both parts of a card in order to use the ability. So on paper, I did really like how the game works mechanically. Now, my problem with the game was that for the first, say, 3 rounds, it feels like you're just doing things for the sake of it. You're not really sure what you're going to go for. You're not sure what you're going to try to collect because, of course, you're bidding blindly most of the time. So it kind of feels like you're just going with the flow, see what you end up with, and then on that 4th or 5th turn, you might have a better idea about what's in players' hands and what they're going to put on the table, and you might have a better, more informed decision on about how much you're willing to spend. But the problem is, by the time you get to that 4th or 5th round, the game is pretty much over, and you only get to use the half and half abilities once or twice during the whole game. And I thought this was going to be quite a big part of the game, where in actuality that became a very very small thing. And to be honest, if you have one of the powers, like for example in the last game we played, on the last round my opponent got both sides of Shoggoth. They turned over my biggest card, and they managed to squeeze the win by a single point. So I think because it is such a lovely looking game and a well produced game, I think sometimes that can maybe put blinkers on how the game is, because it's actually a game that's pretty whimsical. You're just going with the flow. Hopefully it'll work out, and it maybe feels like a bigger game than it actually is. So it's kind of borderline a micro game, really. And I know I even had to go back and read the rulebook kind of when we finished our first game of it, because we're like, are we missing something here? Because it seems like we can never actually use these abilities because they're never, well, basically in this setup, it's very difficult to actually flip cards down in the first place. So therefore you have no use for your potion, you have no use for other things as well. So, maybe I'm missing something, I'm not quite sure. I did reread the rules to make sure we're playing right. But yeah, I really did struggle to find where the actual game was here. And it feels like it's just kind of a sit back and just see what happens thing. But again, mechanically, I think it has a lot of promise, but the game almost kind of ends before it even gets going. It's like having the guts of a good game, but never kind of allowing it to run free and take a life of its own. So, despite me loving the look of it, the way it's produced, etc., I think with such a gluttony of spoils when it comes to great 2-player games, I don't quite think the Seals of Cthulhu is going to hold up against those. Now, that being said, I do think if you play with the same player again and again and maybe explore the different powers, different gods and stuff, you can probably extract the game here and start to find some nuances and how to play things, find those combos to play the right cards at the right time. But again, as I said, I'm probably going to play something else before I dig that deep into a game this simple. So unfortunately, this one didn't work for me, and I wished it did. But yeah, the harsh reality was that I did struggle to extract the fun or even extract the game from this one. Okay, so let's move on to matches. Now, this is a 2 to 6 player game that takes around 30 minutes to play. It's another card game with some pretty quirky mechanisms. So components-wise, you have a deck of these match cards, which will have these cards in different numbers, ranging up to 10. You have a bunch of these gems, which are essentially your victory points. So the player with the most of these at the end of 4 rounds will be the winner. They come in 2 different denominations. You've got the yellow ones and the red ones. The yellows are worth 1 point. The reds are worth 5 points. You can change them as you wish. There are 4 set aside at the start of the game. They should all be yellow, but apologies, I am colourblind, so I cannot quite differentiate the two, but hopefully they're all yellow there. You have these optional burn cards, which I'll talk about a bit later. You can choose to play with them or not. A nice little drawstring bag for your components there. And during setup, each player is going to get given 10 cards at random. The first player will get the match token. And the first player is also going to choose a match card to act as the target card. So here I've put a 7 card on the table and placed one of these flame tokens on that card. So in order to win this game, as I mentioned, you have to get these flame tokens, and you're going to get them in 2 different ways. The first of which is to be the last man standing in the round, and if you do that, you will get all of these flame tokens that have built up throughout the round by being placed on that center card. Now, the other way you can score points is by playing pairs of matching cards in front of you, and we'll talk about how that works. But let's just say, as the first player, I chose to put this down as the target match number. Then it's going to go on to the next player, and you're going to take one of 5 possible actions, and let's hope that these make sense. So the first action you can do is to play play 2 or more cards to match that number. So for example, I might want to play this 5 and a 2. So 5 plus 2 equals 7. That is one of my actions. Now let's say that goes to the next player. They might want to play this flame card. Now there are a number of these in the deck. Now these are very simple, where you simply just discard it and you'll place another yellow token on that center card, building up that potential prize. So let's go back to the other player. They might want to play another set of a 5 and a 2, and if you remember, one of the ways you can score points is to have pairs of the same number. So here they got a pair of 2s and a pair of 5s, so they've got potential 2 points there to claim by the end of the round. Let's go back to the first player. They're going to use an action that they haven't seen before. They're going to play an exact match of the center. So they're going to play this card in front of them, and because it is an exact match with a single card, it acts very much like one of these flame cards, where you'll simply add a new token to the bonfire. So let's go back to this player, and we're going to take an action that we haven't seen before called running up the blaze. And when you do that, you are going to choose, again, more than one card in order to aim towards that total. In this example, they're going to play this 6. And because they haven't got any 1 cards to make up to the 7, they can play any card, any amount of cards to face down to make up towards that target. So they might want to go like this, where you've got the 6 plus 1 is a 7. So again, they've stayed in the round for another turn. Now this is a great way to get rid of your cards that are not very useful, so that's not a great example, but let's say I had this 10, which would otherwise be completely useless. They could use that to run up the blaze to aim towards that target. So I've progressed a couple of rounds here, and it's got back to this player where they can no longer take an eligible action, because again, they've got no perfect matches, they've got no flame cards, they cannot create a pairing or more cards to get this figure exactly, and they cannot even run up the blaze. So if you're all out of options, you're going to have to back out of the round, and when you do that, you are going to get a point for every pair of the same number you've got. So this is a pretty poor example where this player would get a single point because they've got a pair of threes played. But if you are the first player to pass, you'll also take the bonus little token here, and that was set up during the setup of the game. So I think that's a red one, but that should be a yellow one, and so on. So again, if you have no other option, you're going to have to back out of the round and get a point for every pair of the same cards that you have, meaning that this player is now the last man standing and they get to take everything that is on the bonfire into their supply. Of course, they could have done other things, such as playing this flame card here if they were confident of lasting. Therefore, that kitty or that prize of those flame tokens would build up even more. So again, you've got two ways of scoring, either backing out and scoring for your pairs, or being the last man standing, getting all of the cards so all of the flame tokens on the card in the middle. And once the round's completed, you're going to keep hold of any cards you want to, ready for the next round, and everything is going to be reset again, ready to play another round. And again, the player with the most flame tokens by the end of 4 rounds will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on matches, and hopefully that demo made sense. I do appreciate that this game maybe isn't the most intuitive to start with, but once you've got a game out your system, then it does start to flow quite nicely, and all the rules do make sense. But there is a small learning curve there. But something I really like about this game is this kind of gambling or betting or wagering on yourself to stay in the round as long as you can by stretching out those cards as much as you can. But at the same time, if you know those cards are not working in your favour, the target card isn't working for you in terms of the denominations in which you can break down your hand, you might want to back out of the round early and therefore force the players with the best hands of cards to take a much worse prize. Because if you are the last man standing, whether you like it or not, the game or the round ends immediately and you have to take what's there. It's not like once you're the only player, you can keep adding to it. So you can definitely use any hand of cards to your benefit, whether the hand works for you or not. Even backing out early is quite nice because you do get that bonus token. At the same time, that conflicting mechanism of either scoring this way or through the pairs does shine through nicely, because if you do have a nice hand of cards where you are building up several pairs of cards, then you ought to be making sure that you are backing out before the other players do, so that you score all your pairs, because sometimes these points can be worth more than the points from the bonfire itself. So it's all about doing the right thing at the right time. I've also found there's a small degree of bluffing with this game, because sometimes if you don't have the ideal hand of cards, you can somewhat convince the others that you do, and maybe bluff them into thinking, I've got a great hand of cards here. You all might want to back out as quickly as you can, because then I'll get the prize without it all building up. Where in actuality, you had a rubbish hand of cards. Maybe you can last a couple of rounds, but you managed to give your opponents the jitters, really, not to put any more flame tokens on the card, so they're not kind of lining your pockets anymore. Where in actuality, if they'd stayed in the round, they would have won it all for themselves. I think something that needs to be said with this game is that, for me, this is kind of one of those games where you go on your intuition. The decision space isn't huge, and it isn't like ultra deterministic. You don't have complete autonomy over how the game's going to play out. It's kind of more going on a gut reaction and going with a flow. Have you got confidence that your hand is going to stretch far enough? And you're doing that based on very little evidence. So again, those micro decisions are going to determine the winner or the loser of the game, but you're not going to base that on much evidence. So again, very much a game where you'll go on your gut reactions, go on your intuition, and hopefully that will pay off. Now, optionally, you can play with these burn cards, which will kind of stand in a row between you and the other players, and you can spend your flame tokens in order to use the abilities on these cards. And these definitely do mess with the gameplay quite a lot. Like you can see here, this golden match card says that all players must place 2 of their fire tokens on the blaze. So again, really upping the ante there. You got this candlelight card here that says all other players must keep their hands visible for the rest of the round, and so on. Again, you can choose to pay your fire tokens for these should you wish to. Now, I personally prefer it without these cards, because I think the game's a little bit more pure. It feels a little bit more classic without them, but it's nice that you have the option to play with those kind of zanier cards should you wish to. So overall, I think Matches is a very cool game. I've played a ton of card games in my time, and this one feels quite distinct to anything else that I have played, because It's almost like a trick taker, but it's not quite. It has that wagering and betting thing going on, and all about kind of using these hands to stretch out as far as you can, and almost that war of attrition. I think the closest game it reminds me of, actually, is a game called Red 7, where, again, you want to string out your hand of cards as best as possible. Those conflicting scoring things work really well, and the game scales well too. Gorgeous production, as was the Seals of Cthulhu. You know, the card quality is amazing. All these components are really above and beyond in terms of their production quality. So I can't criticise that at all. Yes, I said it's a game it's a bit more whimsical, it's a bit more going on your gut reaction, but it's fun, and you know, it's quick enough for it to you know, to roll with the punches when it comes to the luck. And it is about making those decisions at the right time, even if you are basing it off very little information at times. And again, maybe assessing your hand early and deciding what you want to do, if you're going to go all in, or if you're going to create a couple of pairs and then back out. But yeah, all in all, this one feels really unique. And I like it a lot, and definitely one that's, you know, not widespread known about. And I think, you know, you card game enthusiasts might get quite a lot out of matches, so definitely don't overlook this one. Okay, so that concludes the video. Definitely a video of two halves. You know, Seals of Cthulhu, definitely a swing and a miss for me. But Matches, on the other hand, is a game I really do appreciate. And it holds its own, and I'm really happy to have that one in my collection, because I'm always on the lookout for something a bit quirky and a bit different. So yeah, definitely two different impressions of games here from the same publisher. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video and found out something new about some games that you might not have known about. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.